Hello, thank you so much for tuning in to Around the World in 80 Oysters, a live show about international oyster cuisine, culture, and appreciation. I'm Julie Chu. I'm the founder of In a Half Shell, your guide to the world's best oysters and oyster places and amazing oyster people. So today we are visiting Sweden. So back to Scandinavia, and my special guest is Nigel Moore, a fellow oyster blogger behind the blog called The Oysters My World, which is really focused on the history of oysters and oyster production. It is super fascinating, so we're going to make sure to give you that link to check out Nigel's blog. So I'm going to bring him up.
Hi
Hey
there,
Nigel,
Julie. Hi, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Okay, I'm doing all right. And I just want to say that we've learned maybe to live like an oyster in this close down, the shutdown. We've realized our ambition to live like an oyster.
Absolutely, just hunkering down and
Hmm.
making the best of it, right?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
thank you so
exactly.
much for calling in. I understand that you are currently based in Stockholm.
That's right. Yeah, yeah, Stockholm, Sweden.
Great.
And unfortunately, there are no live oysters in Stockholm because it's on the wrong side of the coast.
Oh, bummer. Well,
But
let's make sure people know where we're going. I'd
yeah,
like to give
exactly.
this
Yeah,
geography
yeah.
tour. So that's us. We're going all across to
There we
here.
go. Yeah,
So you're saying you're on the wrong side.
yeah, exactly. Because the Baltic Sea there on the east coast is too brackish for oysters. So
Oh,
all the oysters are on the west coast. So if you go southwest
got it.
down towards Denmark and go to Grebbestad,
Yep.
which is north of Gothenburg,
Right
um,
here.
it's a little fishing village, maybe a little bit further north, Grebbestad.
Where'd it
Um,
go? We were
I think it's a bit
just
further north.
there.
Two
We go.
B's. That's right. Yeah,
There you go.
exactly. And that is the oyster metropolis of Sweden.
Got it.
And every September, the first Saturday of September, they have an oyster festival, which is a great show.
Hmm.
So the oyster season opens at the beginning of September.
Do you know if they're still having the festival this year?
I think so. I don't think any firm decision has been made, but it's held outside. It's not inside at all. So
Ah,
maybe
fantastic.
they'll be able to hold it. I'm not too sure.
Well, before we go further, I mean, I would love to actually know a little bit more about yourself. It doesn't sound like
Mm.
you're a native Swede, so
No.
tell me where you're from and how you became interested in oysters originally.
Okay. Well, I'm from England, and I came here a long time ago. I hate to remember when I came because it's such a long time ago. I came to do some research, and I met my wife, my future wife, and became a psychologist. And it was during a trip actually to New York and to Vancouver Island.
Yep.
What's happened now?
Oh, we're good.
Okay, sorry. Uh, um, you disappeared.
Can you still see me?
I can't see you, but I can hear you. Everything just vanished, but the photographs are coming up.
Okay. Well,
But I'll continue speaking. But anyway, I remember going to Grand Central Oyster Bar and having some clam chowder.
ooh, yum.
And then I tried the oysters and they were delicious. But unfortunately, I had a bad oyster.
Oh no.
And on my way to Seattle, I was a bit ill, but I recovered
Ooh.
pretty quickly. But it's the only time I've had a bad oyster. But when I came to Seattle and went to Vancouver Island to see a cousin,
Yeah.
sorry, all these photographs are nothing to do with me. I don't know what's happening. There's lots of crazy photographs coming up.
Hmm.
Um,
The stream is okay on my side.
okay, I don't know what's happening here. Okay, I don't know what happened there. I think it may have to do with the Firefox.
Ah.
But I can see you now anyway.
Okay.
Everything's okay. Anyway, so I came to Seattle and went over to Vancouver Island, and the Jaegers were so succulent and creamy and fruity, and
Yep.
I thought it's fantastic. Why do they taste so so differently? They don't taste like fish. And so I became interested in why oysters had this fantastic flavor.
Very
And
cool.
anyway, so I thought I'd like to try and get interested in something that had nothing to do with people because I was working with people as a psychologist.
Right. As far on the
Exactly.
other side as
Yes.
possible.
So that's why I chose something that had nothing to do with human beings.
Well, that's really funny because I mean, for millennials, like people loved oysters, so there's still that
Mm.
connection, right? And
Oh
I
yeah,
feel
yeah,
like
yeah.
your blog just kind of covers so much ground and
Mm.
the history of the oysters, kind of all over the place. But
Yeah,
in
yeah.
particular, you had a really good post about the history of oysters in Sweden.
Mm.
So I'm just curious to know, like, is how was this, like, the Swedish oyster scene back then compared to what it is today?
Well, it's
Or I guess you should describe what it was before, because I don't think people know
no,
about that.
okay. Well, oysters have always been uh, fished and eaten on the west coast. It was a poor man's food
Okay.
during the 19th century, and I read some figure that in 1888 there were 15 tons of oysters farmed or fished, which is about three times the amount that are fished now. So
Oh,
there's
wow.
quite a sizable consumption of wild oysters,
Yeah.
but they were probably regarded as more of a poor man's food, and
Got it.
so they ate them on the west coast. But gradually, people became more and more interested in oysters, and in the last 10 or 15 years, the amount of oysters imported have quadrupled.
Imported
Yeah,
from.
yeah. So there's a great consumption of oysters, not especially of the native oyster.
Okay.
In fact, I would say at the present moment, about 2% of oysters consumed are Swedish native oysters, but the other 98% are imported from mainly France and Ireland.
I see. Okay.
But people got more and more interested in oysters, and in most of the supermarkets, you find the cheap French oysters
Yeah.
on sale for a dollar each.
Yeah.
So people sort of take them home and shuck them. And there are many restaurants in Stockholm and especially in Gothenburg on the west coast, that serve oysters. I
Yeah.
would say nearly every place is a raw bar.
Really? Well,
So
do you think like the increase in consuming the Pacific oyster has grown people's appreciation for the native
I
oyster?
wouldn't say that, but I just think it's a matter of availability. I think people have just
Okay.
become used to, going on holiday and eating oysters, and they just want to eat oysters in restaurants and
Right.
buy them at weekends, and they haven't really been interested in the native oyster
Right.
because, for example, in Stockholm,
And
they are the
this is what we're talking about,
yeah,
everybody.
yeah, okay. Well, you see they're not the same shape as the Gigers
Right.
as the Pacifics, but so they're very very difficult to buy and to find in restaurants unless you're on the west coast,
Got it.
because they don't sell them actually in Stockholm very very often. You find one or two places, and
Yeah.
often they say, well, please, can you come and order how many you want? And then they will buy some for you. So it's a very special oyster. It's a kind of iconic oyster that's very rare and very very sort of prized after. The
Sure.
people. So
Well, we were talking about in my episode about Denmark. They were also, with Jonna, the native oyster also seemed like it was being pushed out in some places by the Pacifics. Is that
mm,
happening at all in Sweden as well?
I think it's on the verge of doing that
Okay.
because the Gigers, the Pacifics. I regard them as being like rabbits of the sea.
Yeah.
They spawn and reproduce like mad, and they spread like they've wandered up the coast from Holland
Right.
all the way through Germany and Denmark, and along the western coast of Sweden. And you can find them all over the place, and but they're more at a shallower level. The natives are they usually find them at a level between 3 and 12 or 15 meters, which is about 10 to 50 meters, 10 to 50 feet of water. And so far, the Jaegers haven't found their way as deep as the natives, but they're beginning to be found, and the people who dive for the natives often pick up Jaegers as well to be sold.
Are the natives only found wild, or is anybody farming them?
Well, I think you may have a photograph of a longline culture.
Oh yes.
And this company is called Havstens. The one on the left there. They've started about 3 years ago to farm the wild native oysters because they found a way of being able to collect the spat.
Okay.
And they've started to put them in these floating bags.
Okay.
And they started about 3 years ago, although it took about 15 years to get everything in order. But it's a fantastic operation, and they're really responsible, sustainable. This cultivation is just sustainable and responsible. It's
Where did you say this was happening?
This is happening near Grebbestad.
Okay.
It's in a sort of in a bay near there.
Okay.
And
you can find their products in the market.
They have been selling them mainly to Gothenburg, and but they are starting to sell them in Stockholm through wholesalers.
Interesting. Well, given that there is a wild fishery of the natives, do you know why they started this company?
Well, the thing is, the only way to get wild native oysters before was to dive for them. The lady on the right there, she's a Barbara Scully of Scandinavia. Do you remember Bittern Point?
Yes, I sure do.
Barbara Scully. Well, she's a fantastic woman, Lotta Klemming. She is the Barbara Scully of Scandinavia. She loves diving. She loves the sea, and she's taken over the company from her father and uncle.
Okay.
And so she picks about 5 of those baskets you see there a week. Right. So it's about 800 a week she picks, and but you're only allowed to dive for them and use a kind of net. You're not allowed to dredge them or to use any kind of machinery to get the oysters. And there's been a lot of controversy about how to cultivate them. And this company I told you about, where there's a photograph on the left, they applied for permission to start a cultivation. And they started about 3 years ago, and so they're trying to do it in a very sustainable way, and they won a special prize last year for sustainable farming.
That's good. And are these oysters the ones pictured here? Are these
on the left? On the left, yeah.
On the left, these are the farmed oysters, or these are the wild?
Yeah, the ones on the left are from the farmed from the bags.
Ah.
And the one, the two on the right, well, it's the same one actually.
Yep.
They're picked up from the. They've been dived for. They've been collected off the bottom.
Have you tried the farm natives against the wild natives? Is there a difference in flavor?
Not yet, because I've only got to know them very recently, and wait a minute, it keeps disappearing.
You're still on my screen.
Okay, well, it just went black. My screen went black, and maybe I have to keep moving the prompter. But anyway, I haven't really got in contact with them. I want to try and go down and visit them in the autumn.
Right.
And but the thing is about the native, I think, is the Gigas or the Pacific can be a little bit mild,
Okay. Yes. Sure.
but the native is it's explosive. It's a very potent, rich, vibrant taste.
Yeah.
And I think it always gives you a kind of surprise, which I like. When you're eating, one of the pleasures of eating is being surprised.
Yep.
And the native is almost guaranteed to give you a surprise.
Yep.
Maybe not always a good one, but
it will certainly leave an impression
yeah,
on your mind and your palate.
I mean, they can be so vibrant and potent, and
Yeah.
I mean, I've had ones I've almost given back because they're so pungent.
Wow.
But I mean, they're almost on the border of being acceptable to be eaten. But
You think that's why they're not quite as popular in the country as the Pacifics? It's just a little too much oyster.
maybe. I mean, I think people tend to react in a negative way. That they get so surprised, maybe perhaps disgusted because it's not what they expect. And
Right.
it's not like a Gigas. It hasn't got that creamy, fruity taste.
Right.
But I mean, the thing is, you have to really smell them and then chew them and chew them and chew them. I mean, it takes a much longer time to eat them. I think that's great. I think that's really good. People swallow oysters. I think it's
Oh no, you can't do that. You
sacrilege.
can't just like shoot them. I don't know how that seems to persist, but you're right. Now I'm curious, like having visited the U.S. and trying the American oyster bars, is there a similar culture of oyster appreciation in Sweden?
I think so. Yeah, I think generally it's roughly the same. That people like to take 12 oysters. They like to take. At the weekends, for example, they take 6 or 12 oysters and then have a meal, and it's a very nice social thing to share a plate of oysters. And I was thinking before about whether I've seen any barbecued or grilled oysters, and I've never seen any. I don't think
Huh.
on the menu. I
Interesting.
mean, I'm not going to say that they don't
Right.
exist, but I mean, I know some of the very upmarket restaurants. If you go for a 15-course meal,
Oh, like the fine dining tasting
yeah. I
menus
mean,
have an
they'll
oyster.
probably present you with one single oyster which has been prepared in a very special way, and
Right.
but otherwise, people like raw oysters, and but as I say, people are getting more and more interested and more savvy about oysters, and
Sure. How do you see that happening? Do you see just people on social media enjoying them, or do you actually see new businesses pop up,
I
like
think
pop-up oyster bars?
more and more restaurants
Okay.
which are dealing with seafood, they will have a broader selection of French oysters.
Got it.
Uh, so and there's one very nice restaurant that they have it's called a Oyster Rally.
Oyster
Every
rally.
the last Friday of month, you start off at 3 o'clock and you have to try and eat all the oysters up as quickly as possible.
That's awesome.
So it's like a happy hour, happy hour with
Right. Oh, I like
but
that oyster rally.
yeah. And you have to try and eat them as quickly as possible. And say after
Oh
every
boy.
half hour, we've eaten 200 or 500 or 1,000, and so they,
Oh my
they
God.
they they get people to eat them maybe too quickly. But unfortunately, the oysters are the cheaper end of the market.
I see. So yeah, for $1 an oyster, I guess that's not
yeah
terribly
yeah
bad
yeah
compared to. So how much do the native oysters cost when they are in the market?
$5.
$5.
Hmm. Probably
Wow.
in the shops, and I mean in the restaurant you may have to pay $6.
Is there a difference in size of oyster that you
Yeah,
can
yeah.
get? There are. Okay, and $5 is for like the middle size or
The
the smaller?
smallest, I mean, usually they don't sell the smallest ones. I mean,
Okay.
it depends on the season. I mean,
Mm.
I would never eat a native oyster in October, November, December.
Okay.
Yeah, because after spawning, the meat content is so little,
Yeah.
and so you have to wait until after the winter when they fatten up and they're full of glycogen.
Yes, for
You know,
sure.
so if you buy them in March, April, May, then they are really, really rich and plumpy and meaty, and they're beautiful.
Would you say that is the best time to visit
Def
to eat
Definitely, yeah,
oysters?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so maybe
Actually,
next year.
yeah, well, it's a good time to visit Scandinavia generally in the springtime, um, and of course they are beginning to sell the wild tigers as well in
Oh, okay.
restaurants, and so you can find, especially in Gothenburg, you'll find
Yeah,
wild tigers on the menu. They're not friendship tigers;
right,
they're the wild Swedish tigers.
right. Well, going back to the history, is and knowing that Gothenburg had, uh, well, quite a bit of seafood. What was like the entire seafood culture like? What was actually on the high end of
Well, I think
creatures?
lobsters. Yeah, I think
Lobsters.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Lobsters have always been the the best
okay.
seafood dish, yeah, and they also have a an oyster festival. Sorry, a lobster festival
Lobster
when
fest.
they go crazy for for lobsters. But I always think what's special about the oyster is it's natural. It's not cooked. Um, the every oyster is different.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Can we do, okay, one, like, I'm very curious because I know you had posted a lot of entries about oysters in art and recently
Sorry, in
oysters
art.
in
Yeah, okay.
artwork.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
I stumbled across a couple of these Dutch masters in Boston when I was just walking around
Mm.
their art museum. And I was fascinated that they were just being shown sort of like the pre-Instagram moments, right? It's like, here's
Mm,
my amazing feast. I'm
mm.
curious to know, like, what is the most surprising thing you've discovered looking at oysters and art, or is there anything that people don't really know about?
Uh, it's difficult to say because I think I mean oysters have always had that kind of aphrodisiac quality, and
Mm,
there's this they're a sort of symbol of desire in most people's minds. But on the other hand, if you look at these artworks, they're also a symbol of decadence,
mm,
of vanity. That oysters compose a threat. You can be seduced, and start thinning. The old idea
right.
of doing too much or eating too much, and
Okay.
the Dutch and the Belgians they were very particular about living a good life, and oysters could point you down the wrong road.
Uh
So
Got it.
be careful, Julie. Be careful.
I think I'm already too late.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think we're almost up against time, and I just have one more question for you,
Okay. Okay.
which is, and I like to ask this to everybody, but if you could visit anywhere else in the world,
Mm.
assuming we can all visit somewhere eventually, to try their local oysters, where would be the first place you would like to go?
Okay. Well, since I'm interested in the native oyster, I was thinking that if I could go anywhere in the world, maybe the southern coast of Chile, and
Fantastic.
go and try the Austria Chilena. Um, I wanted to go to the Olympia to try the Olympia oysters because that's also a native oyster, but I never got
Right.
there. But I
Oh,
think if you were to buy me a free ticket, Julia, I'd ask you to buy me one to Chile.
that would be quite the trip. Yeah, I'm actually
Yeah.
trying to. I've been talking to an acquaintance of mine to schedule a
Mm.
chili oyster talk too.
Ah,
So
great.
stay
Okay.
tuned for
Yeah, yeah,
that.
yeah. Yeah, well,
Um,
I think they must be fantastic down that long, straggly coast.
right? I would imagine so too. So,
Mm, mm.
well, anyway, thank you so much for talking oysters.
Okay, well,
with
it's
us.
my pleasure, Julia. Great to talk to you, and you're doing a great thing with this around the world in 80 oysters. And
Well, I'm gonna try to get to 80. Who who knows if I can actually do it? But thank
yeah,
you so
okay,
much.
okay, okay.
But
Well, nice to talk to you anyway, and happy travels.
thank you. You too. Stay safe. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, and keep healthy. Same to you then.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
okay. Bye bye. Bye.
Oh, that was Nigel Moore. He has a great blog. The website is on there, but I'll post in the comments anyway. It's the Oysters My World, and if you search for Sweden in his search bar, there should be this really amazing post about Swedish oyster history comes up. It's quite a read. I find it really entertaining. I'm like a total oyster nerd. But yeah, go check that out. And coming up Thursday, we're going to go to Spain with Inés Fernandez, who's the owner of El Puertito Oyster Bar. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, you just heard me say we're going to visit Chile. I have a couple of other prime oyster countries. I know people have been asking about France. That is coming. So please be patient. And we will talk soon.